did it.
Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, August 16th, 2011. It's 9 a.m. We're at the Palm Coast Community Center for the regularly scheduled business meeting of the Palm Coast City Council. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mayor Netz?
Here.
Vice Mayor Meeker?
Here.
Councilmember DeStefano?
Here.
Councilmember Lewis?
Here.
Councilmember Mormon?
Here.
Mayor, all members are present.
Thank you very much. First item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the August 2nd council meeting and the August 9th council workshop. Are there any additions, corrections, deletions, or is there a motion for approval?
I'll motion to approve the item.
I'll second.
Moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 2, a proclamation recognizing September as Muscular Dystrophy Association Firefighter Appreciation Month. Mr. Meeker.
I caution you all in advance, this document has words and syllables which exceed 3. And I will do my best. Is there somebody here to choose tonight? You would probably be the most appropriate, I think, unless there's somebody else here. Muscular Dystrophy Association. Whereas hundreds of dedicated and selfless firefighters in our state provide vital and life-saving services to the citizens of their communities, and whereas at a moment's notice these men and women risk their lives by subduing fires and rescuing those trapped in infernos, as well as saving citizens from emergencies that could have been deadly situations, and whereas firefighters contribute significantly to the continued well-being of Palm Coast through the outstanding commitment to community service, their sense of duty and responsibility is evidenced by the hundreds of volunteer hours in annual boot drives to collect funds to fight muscular dystrophy, and whereas for the past 50 years, firefighters throughout Flagler County and the nation have worked to eradicate the muscular dystrophies, Lou Gehrig's disease, oh my goodness.
Myasthenia.
Thank you, Mayor. Gravis, and other neuromuscular diseases. And whereas many of the Palm Coast citizens have benefited from the funds raised by firefighters in the Fill the Boot campaign, and these public servants make invaluable contributions to our city in all the tasks they perform, now therefore be it proclaimed that the Mayor and the City Council of the City of Palm Coast do hereby proclaim September 2011 as Muscular Dystrophy Association Firefighter Appreciation Month, and commend all Palm Coast firefighters for their efforts on behalf of the Muscular Dystrophy Association, adopted the 16th day of August 2011. Mayor Netz. Mike, you guys do, well, with the mayor's help, you guys do a phenomenal job. It's not just what you do with the firefightings and the emergency medical services and all that, but the giving of your time to make the city of Palm Coast a better place for the citizens is greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, just so you know, we'll be out all month throughout the county. Firefighters with the Fill the Boot, so any support you can give to us is appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. Agenda item number 3, presentation on growing business locally. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, excuse me, Mayor, City Council, as you know, Prosperity 2021 has 2 main focuses. One is trying to stabilize our neighborhoods, make improvements to our residential areas to maintain quality of life for the residents, but also promoting small businesses. We recently established a business assistance center just to do exactly that. And this is one of what I hope to be many updates as to the progress we're making and really what some of the goals are. We've only been in existence for about 3 months, so this is kind of the first quarter. So I think Bo is going to start off and then turn it over to Joe and do a little tag team with a presentation.
Good morning, Mayor and Council, and we're here mainly to talk about 2 things related to Prosperity 2021. Of course, the Business Assistance Center, which has been in operation for about 90 days. And of course, it ties into some of the efforts jointly with the BAC and our purchasing department of how we're trying to do outreach and assistance for procurement locally. Joe's been making the rounds around the county, to the county last night, and then also City of Bunnell and Flagler Beach, kind of talking about what the strategy is for the Business Assistance Center going forward, and then also sharing kind of a report on what has occurred during the first 90 days. So during this presentation, we'll start off with that, and then we'll come back around to some ways that we've implemented here at the city to increase city spending locally, and also tying back to the BAC, how we may increase spending locally for all of our businesses. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joe, and then handed out to you was also our new rack card. There's some available for some citizens that would like to take any, kind of outlines where our services are, and all of them are free. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Joe.
Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you really for the opportunity to be here today. I'm actually here in two roles. First, as the area manager of the Small Business Development Center at UCF, and secondly, I'll talk to you a little bit more about my role as the area manager of the Business Assistance Center, and we'll talk more about the strategy. But initially, we'll kind of try to put this all in a context for you to understand where we're going. And it's really critical, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here, because as elected officials, you have a vested interest in the outcome of what it is that we're undertaking. And I think that you'll see that over the next year, what we will achieve will be far greater than really what we set out to do from the beginning. I also want to thank you for having the foresight to actually fund this position. And I work for all of the businesses within Flagler County, over 4,000 of them, and I know that each one that we help will be very appreciative. I don't really need to tell you very much about what's going on in the economy. I mean, we see it every day. We read about it every day. These are just some interesting facts. The last three recessions, or even the one that we might be in or coming out of, are really all rooted in global financial problems, and we face a global economy. Probably some interesting things as we look, the challenge that we face today is really one of how do we get people back to work. We really need to be creating jobs, and where do we find those jobs, and how do we help create them? Part of the problem is that we see that productivity, since 1955, as the U.S. measures productivity, we have had continuous productivity gains every single year. So that has some bearing on where we are and what's going on in terms of jobs. The other part is when we talk about the global economy, we find that the influence of a global supply chain puts the pressures on our local businesses, and it puts additional pressure on wages, right? We wonder where we are. We know that corporate profits have come back to pre-recession levels, so in some respect, people are still out there buying. The problem that we have is that corporations have a lot of money that they can spend into technology and systems that improve productivity and improve actually response time to customers. They found a better way to do that. Unfortunately for us, our small businesses don't have that kind of money, but they still have the same challenges, and operating in the environment we are today makes it all the more difficult for them. On top of that, we say that we now begin to add the uncertainty of the regulatory environment, the tax policy, healthcare law, and now we talk more about the effect of debt to GDP ratios. All of those are important because at some point, the message that continues to come out is one of gloom, right? Gloom affects consumer sentiment. Consumer sentiment affects purchasing power at the retail level. Right? Eventually, we'll see rises in interest rates will affect, again, more purchasing power and the ability of our small businesses to get loans. I show you this chart only to try to put into context what it is that we put into place here with the development of the Business Assistance Center. This is really information that comes out of Michigan State, right? And I put the resource down there. This is a relatively new 2001, April 2001 study. And it looks at, basically what it's looking at is job growth. But here the study says that across the country, in all of the cities, counties, and states, in the United States, we spend $50 billion annually recruiting new businesses. That study further goes on to say that over the last 2 decades, where we've had growth and then we've also had periods of recessions, They've looked at what has happened to net job growth. In the case where we go out and recruit, in both the expansion and recession decades, recruitment has resulted in net job losses. Right? We spend $50 billion, and at the end of everything, we still have a net job loss. Startup companies, which is really part of a growth strategy that we're working on here, startup companies result in net job gains during periods of expansion, but in the periods of decline, again, which we're in now, it shows a net job loss. The only model that works in both an expansion and a recession economy is the one to grow from within. When you look at the cost of doing the business, a grow from within strategy says that it costs, on average, across the United States, and these are national figures, it says that it costs $200 for every job that we create. It costs $20,000, which I'm sure includes entitlements or other add-ons, initiatives for people to come here. Right. It costs $20,000 for each job that we create. Right. Now, again, those are national figures. Each one would be a little bit different as we come down into the communities, and I'm certain that Flagler County would be different again. But in terms of the idea of where we spend our time, this is clearly indicating that a growth strategy is really where we're going to find our way out. We talk a lot now about the Business Assistance Center, and I talk about the Business Assistance Center as a virtual organization. It's virtual because it has no employees, but it has 4,000 customers. It has no assets, but it has many resources. And it has no infrastructure, but it has a lot of moving parts. And those moving parts are all of the partners of the Business Assistance Center, including the local government and including all of those agencies that you see down below. Flagler Chamber of Commerce, CBE, Flagler Enterprise, and SCORE. What it basically says is how we integrate all of those activities, not the functions, the activities, how those play in support of the local businesses here in Palm Coast as well as in Flagler County. And we say that working independently, our customers don't get the full benefit. Right? We all have the same customer base. We all have the same idea of what we're trying to do. So working together is a lot better for us. I like to think about this as kind of like the synergistic effect. The sum of what we do is far greater when you look at us as a total in the Business Assistance Center than it is by measuring even the sum of each one of the parts. Right? We can do it a whole lot better when we speak with one strategy, one voice, and how we approach economic growth within the county than we can by trying to find our own individual customers. Right? And I talk a little bit there about leaving our independent brands apart. Besides, I know I'm working through the University of Central Florida, but when I work with my customers, it's simply we working with them as part of the Business Assistance Center. I actually had one person came in, and when they fill out some of the forms that we need to put them into the system, when it said, you know, what is the agency that you're coming to, they said Business Assistance Center, and I thought that's a big step forward, right? Because typically people would say we've kind of geared them to think it's SBDC when they come into the Business Assistance Center, but here's a case where someone is now recognizing the greater brand, right, of the Business Assistance Center rather than the individual brand, and we kind of leave that at the door. I show you this because, again, we talk about the synergistic effect of what we do. These are all of the partners. Right? The Flagler Chamber of Commerce is more about advocacy. These are just my terms in terms of what they do. I'm not trying to simplify anything. I'm just trying to say, really, how do we fit in and how do we work together? CBE does workforce development, UCF and Daytona State training development. Your role in terms of what you do and the guidance that you provide, legislative and regulatory, and then I show here business interaction. Future recruitment partner is open, and the SBDC and SCORE is part of business development. The idea behind the recruitment partner being open is addressing the fact that within a growth strategy, that is still an activity which is yet to be defined. Right? How we do it is one thing. Whether we do it or not is part of the growth strategy. Right? This chart is not really intended to show any organizational structure. It's not intended to show control. It's simply designed to show market segmentation. Right? How we look at growth customers within Flagler County, I've broken down into different categories because as we try to help them, the amount of effort that we put in, the types of skills that we transfer to them, the education that we provide to them is going to be different. Right? So we have a recruitment strategy, we have a micro strategy, which is really the 2 years or less, and we know that for many businesses, I think the national statistic is that 95% of all small businesses fail within the first 5 years. Most of the time they fail because of lack of capital. Right? But the idea behind this is that the type of training and the type of counseling that we provide to small businesses will be very different than what we provide to the ones that are at the end, we show as existing growth. Those companies that are greater than 3 years, have 5 or more employees, and they have the potential to grow. Here it says, beyond 500,000 and up to 10 million. That's just the category that we're in. How these will play out over time, I'm not quite sure, but I do know that there's a different way of approaching each one of these different markets and understanding their need. I'd like for you to think about us as how we return on total investment. That's the way I'd like to be measured. That's the way I'd like to report it to you. I'll still provide the other information that we have that Palm Coast contracted to UCF. But when we talk about return on investment, we're talking about how we measure that, which is increased sales as well as profits. The labor dollars saved or added, I'm very cautious about using the term saved. Right? Saved could have many different connotations to it. I will just tell you that the way I view a job saved is if I'm working with a business and I know that that business will go out of business unless we do something and we keep them going, then I count that as a job saved. I don't count a job saved if we're simply out working and that person is still there. So it's got to be something very quantifiable to me that we can count that. Right. And then we also do it in terms of capital acquired because one of the main missions of the BAC is really to help people in terms of access to capital. So we'll take a look at that. We will be able over time to present to you a return on investment. And then we'll also like to do return on how much money it's costing us for every job that we create. Right? I think that's an important number. And we will be providing that. It'll take us, we've got some of the data today. It's just really premature after 3 months to be able to quantify it. It's probably more meaningful after 6 months or 9 months where we're into looking at really the productivity of, we'll call it the Business Assistance Center. This chart is one that it's in the initial stages of putting together. All right, it talks about the current status. And these are some measures. I'm sure it'll change by the time I speak with you again. But that information is current as of today. So if we look at customers by business type, we're saying that 23 of the current customers that I work with have 2 years or less in business. I'd also add that as we look at, I think it's a total of 33 businesses, about 70% of the businesses that I'm working with today are existing businesses. Right. So it shows you again how we're breaking, how we break that down. It's interesting that we already show within 3 months, we have 2 businesses that we're working with that are in what I would call this growth strategy mode. Right. The customers by location, you can see what that is. I haven't really looked to see how that percentage-wise breaks down, but it's probably consistent with the number of businesses in each of the cities. Recruitment, I think it's important that we have that. Unfortunately, we don't have that information today. They probably had a few more things to think about. But ideally, what I'd like to be able to talk to you about is just that we have activity within the Business Assistance Center that we can say we are talking with people. We can't really go through and discuss who they are. Right? The jobs saved are added in the retail section. That's one I said that person is still in business today because a person was working with us. That job is here. Right? And the other 73 are jobs that were added through CBE. And we have a close partnership with actually all of the members that are on here on the board. And we have found $20,000 in capital for one of the businesses.
Yeah, I don't know if we haven't rehearsed this one this morning. That's kind of just an overview of the first 90 days, and I'm sure you'll have questions for Joe at the end. One of the first things Joe did when he got to the city was talk to our purchasing department basically about how we can increase city spending locally and how we kind of change the perception, whether or not the city's open for business. And as you're aware, we have a local purchasing policy that really goes into place for those higher end bids, but how do we get that down to purchasing cards and also smaller purchases? And with the help of Joe and Brian, new forms were created, and every purchase now you have to put a justification of why you didn't get local bids. And it is reviewed and will be rejected if the bid is if that information is not filled in or it's not a good enough reason. So, more importantly, just forms and procedures is, of course, the culture in the organization. Yesterday, we had our first meeting with the different staffs of the departments to talk about how important it is to purchase local, how it affects them and the local economy, and also to think every time that you purchase a product and think if it can be done locally. And then, of course, there's another side of this, and Joe plays into this as well, is how do we educate local businesses about how to do business with the city, which we handed out a new brochure. We didn't have one before, kind of explaining the process to do business with the city. But also taking a look at what we currently purchase outside the county and giving that information to Joe so he can share that with business interests where there may be opportunities for businesses here to grow and do business with the city. So this is kind of a comprehensive approach of taking a look at how we do business in the city and actually how our local businesses can improve with some opportunities to do business with the city. That was one step. And then the second step is, of course, how do we increase spending locally? One we talked about is identifying opportunities for local businesses, but also maybe asking other government agencies through the work of Joe and businesses such as the larger companies, Florida Hospital, to take a look at their expenditures and see what they're spending locally. Also, Joe, you need to come back up here for this one. We're happy to announce that the Business Assistance Center will be hosting the Back to Business Expo, and I'll let Joe talk about that, where I fixed the Elmo.
This is our first chance of trying to get in and say, what can we do specifically to help small business in Flagler County? And we are putting on a business-to-business trade expo. It is going to be privately funded, to be held in Hammock Beach on October the 7th. The idea behind this is to showcase products and services of Flagler County businesses. As we began to think about this, the thought was that for this event to be successful, we needed the assistance of our national retailers and other large businesses within Flagler County. And I'm happy to tell you that we've been out doing that sponsorship drive. It's really a difficult thing to do, but if I weren't doing it for small businesses, it would probably be impossible to do. But going out and talking to our national retailers and all of the businesses that I've been to today, I can tell you that every business gets it 100%. They understand that even their top line will grow if we can grow small businesses, and they're willing to help in many different ways. It's just a matter of us putting together the strategy to make that happen. Dr. Ted Anders will be our keynote speaker. Dr. Ted Anders has a small business in Flagler Beach. So we're kind of trying to stay local. Again, this will be on the kind of the nature of what you would find in a national trade show. We're going to have training activities going on. There'll be one about working with the city. There's going to be one about sales and selling and promotional strategies. There'll be others on social media. There'll be others on restoring credit. The idea behind this is to bring people together to let them see what's available. I spoke with one business as part of the sponsorship program and told them what we were going to do, and it was very interesting because the comment came out, and this business had been here for a long time, and said, I don't even know what's available in all the businesses in Flagler County. So here's a chance, and the large companies, we want to be involved as well. and they will be. And I'm happy to tell you that the first one that came back to us, and it's really only been recent, and I'll only mention one because they're the ones that come back yesterday and confirmed late yesterday, is Walmart. Walmart said unequivocally, we want to be a part of this. There are others that want to be a part of it too. They just have to go through back to their corporate headquarters and get approvals and things like that. So as we go through, you'll start to see a lot more of the accounts that we've been talking to, and we have talked to almost every national retailer that's located here in Flagler Beach, or in, Flagler County. The idea behind it is to allow the large retailers to see what's available rather than for them to take the monies and go outside the county. It's also a chance for our small businesses to see what opportunities they have to grow their businesses, perhaps in services that they don't provide. The main idea is to just bring people together who have a common interest, and the hope is that we will generate additional revenues, and then we'll generate additional jobs. Our goal right now is to have 100 businesses participate. It'll start with, we'll have a lunch and a keynote speaker. There'll be the trade show going on in the afternoon, training sessions going on, and then we'll have a social hour at the end. The idea, again, is to showcase what we have, what we can offer here within Flagler County.
And Mayor and Council, that concludes our presentation, kind of giving you an update on the first 90 days of the Business Assistance Center, and also some upcoming events and then changes with our purchasing policy to stress local purchases. With that, if you have any questions, me and Joe will be happy to answer.
Council questions. Mr. Meeker.
I've got a couple of questions. Now, these are just ideas that kind of, flittered in, flittered out, turned them all about as you were doing your presentation. So I'm not putting these out as a formal presentation by any means. I'm just throwing these out as ideas for you guys to consider, to see if they're worthwhile looking into, and then maybe getting back to us if there's any merit to what I'm talking about. Okay? The first one is because the cost of health care or medical insurance for employees is such an expensive item on any small business. I'm wondering if there's any possibility of kind of forming and I hesitate to use the term a conglomerate, but a group of individuals that band together, a bunch of small businesses that band together under maybe a program sponsored with the city to pay their own health care costs, but because there's so many of them, they get a better cost per employee. Does that make any sense, what I just described?
Yes, it does. That's certainly something to think about under the banner of the Business Assistance Center. And
because if by using our negotiating power as the city and a bunch of businesses coming together, if we can negotiate lower costs for them, I can only hope that it would give better health care for the employees and a better bottom line for the business. So if you guys would look into that one and then tell us, yeah, it sounds like a good idea, we're going to run with it a little bit, or ain't no way, mayor and council, it just isn't going to work. I'll accept either answer, but I'd appreciate looking at that. Second, I was fascinated by your micro-strategy discussion on one of your charts there for those businesses less than 2 years, basically the startups. And I've always been interested in startup companies as well, and was wondering if it would be worth looking into some kind of a joint agreement with the school board, for example, to have a competition. I don't know if it would be the future problem solvers or if they have a business development curriculum there where there's a competition that is held between schools locally, and the best idea rises to the top, and the city and the school board agrees to contribute. I don't know, I threw out numbers like $10,000 on a given year for maybe the first 2 years of startup, to give them a chance to go out and prove their concept. Find some way to fund them, get them going, provide them some office space, see if they can make a go at it, since most of these companies are undercapitalized, and certainly most high school students don't have a lot of funds to pick on as a general rule. So I'm wondering if that's worthy of some discussion as well. And my last one was, I guess it was about a year and a half ago or something, there was a grand opening for a small business in town, and they were doing LED lighting, and they were solar charged and all that. I thought it was a really interesting concept. Don't know if they're still in business or not, but my question is, are we providing contacts, since you're now making contacts with the major retailers, are we introducing these guys to like the local Walmart manager who brings in his sales guys and says, hey, look, there's a product that's being manufactured locally. It might be worthwhile for us to consider going nationally with this. Could we do a test trial in the region, open up a kiosk in our store with these solar-powered LED lights, and develop a new business?
I mean, I have had that discussion when I've gone out to the local retailers, the national ones, knowing very well that, I mean, the decisions to bring those products into their line, it rests at their corporate headquarters.
Exactly.
But what I say to them is, it's important for you to go around, because we do have companies that could be providing products to several of the retailers that are here. And we say that it's a lot easier for that business if the store manager, for example, goes back and says, I saw this really unique product. I think it's worth us trying that. That has a lot more credence to it than having to go through the whole sales line. So that's really the idea behind what we're doing. There are businesses here that have products that could be going national. And in fact, we are working as part of the Business Assistance Center with 3 companies within Flagler County that have the potential of taking their products national within the next year.
Fantastic. That's it for me, Mayor. It's just flittery.
Nothing.
Other council questions?
Yes, Joe, we've talked before, and as you know, most cities and towns have come to the realization that the economic development is local. It used to be that you go for the big guys, go for the kill, but you're finding that what you're doing, developing existing businesses and new businesses locally, is economic development, and a scale that people don't normally think of. The expo idea, I think, is great, and I think even though you're bringing in 100 companies, I believe you said. Can you imagine if you were to do a big expo, how far your reach can be? I think this is a great start in the right direction, because most businesses love to go to expos because it attracts a lot of other businesses that they need to look at. So it's a great idea.
Thank you. I mean, that is really the goal. I mean, it'd be nice to actually say we've run out of space at 100 and we should have thought of a larger location. The kind of idea right now is to kind of get out there and let people know that we're here. A lot of people still don't know that the Business Assistance Center or the SBDC are even here to help them. Right? And so this would be our first opportunity to go out and to really see, what the impact can possibly be. But you're right on with what you said.
Excellent.
Yes, sir. To answer Mr. Meeker's question, reference the LED solar lighting. Had that discussion. The light is in existence. It is being marketed. Before they were taking it to Afghanistan and over to the Asian market, but it is now being marketed here in the United States, and they're pushing it to try and get it on the market through the outlets here. So they are in existence and they're working it.
Right. If that's the business that I think it is, we are working with that particular business and putting them in touch with folks that had, there was a DOD, Department of Defense trade show down in Orlando. We had them down there in contact with that. We're working to try to help them get in with USAID, because the benefit of that product is actually international. It's great even in where we live in Palm Coast because of the hurricane season and loss of power, but it's far greater when people have no lighting and they only use fuels to light their houses. So great potential for that business, and they're still around, and we are working hard with them to help.
Piggybacking on Mr. Meeker's idea, 9-10 years ago, there was the first of the intergovernmental meetings here in Flagler County, and we had talked about looking for ways to work together. And one of the issues that was brought up amongst the cities in the county was joint health benefits. And after 6 months of study and research, the conclusion was that we were so different that there really was no possibility of forming a joint venture. But looking at what the city's done on healthcare, we've established a clinic model to try to reduce our insurance premiums. Maybe some of your small businesses that perhaps are not offering health benefits to their employees might be interested in joining a consortium and purchasing as a group a block of time at one of the existing clinics or the clinic that the county's created, so they could provide some sort of benefit to their employees. If nothing else, getting the employee a reduced rate through a joint purchasing. Things like that don't necessarily cost the city, the county, the Business Assistance Center any money. It's some investment of time putting together a concept that the small businesses might not be able to do individually, but collaboratively, collectively, they could. So I'd applaud anything we can do along those lines.
Good idea. We will look into that.
Okay. Other council questions? Thank you very much. Keep up the good work. You know, it's interesting here, the statistics you gave us from the Michigan study exactly parallel what was in the February issue of Florida Trend magazine, talking about the real strength, the real growth and job creation is your small local businesses. So you're right on target. Agenda item number 4, an ordinance, a rezoning ordinance from multifamily residential and commercial to master plan development. Mr. Reichman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, providing for the amendment of the official zoning map as established in sections 2.05 and 2.06 of the City of Palm Coast Unified Land Development Code. This is amending the official zoning map for Seminole Point subdivision, parcel ID numbers 3112, 31, 5371, 50, 0010, 3112, 31, 5371, 50, 0041, and 3112, 31, 5371, 50, 0020. Of the public records of Flagler County, Florida, containing 85 more or less acres from high-intensity commercial and multifamily residential, in part, to Master Plan Development Zoning District, or MPD, providing for conflict severability and providing for an effective date. This is quasi-judicial, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Being a quasi-judicial ordinance, are there any ex parte communications that need to be disclosed?
No.
None here.
Hearing none, Mr. Lander.
First of all, I want to object to the shortcut on 5 zeros. I've been enjoying the 00000, and he's taken all the fun out of it. All right, now more from a serious standpoint. This is second reading. City Council was given the full presentation 2 weeks ago. This is a proposal that really kind of cleans up an area that recognizes the wetlands, the environmentally sensitive areas, but also coordinates the commercial corner with potential multifamily residential that it currently is zoned for. We've had no additional feedback or comments from the public at this time. We're ready to prepare to answer any questions and believe it's ready for final reading and approval.
Could you give us just a quick summary of what is contained herein?
Yes. The site is 85 acres. It's located at the northeast corner of Seminole Woods Boulevard and U.S. Highway 1. There's approximately 305,000 square feet and 200 units that would be concentrated in this area. The balance of the area, this and this, would be approximately a minimum of 41 acres of wetland preservation.
Council questions? Seeing none, let's open the meeting to the public. Any from the public wish to be heard on this agenda item? Anyone wish to be heard? Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. Additional questions, comments, or a motion?
I move it.
Mr. Lewis.
Just one question I meant to ask earlier. This is something that's not in the works in terms of development. This is something that we're just approving now, and it's going to be shelved for a period of time, or is it going into active production?
This is the first step in the ability to move forward with a project, because the zoning right now would require them to build multifamily in this location. And this area here was designated for commercial. So we're recognizing, by approving this, you're recognizing the environmental constraints on the property and the development potential in the, at the intersection based on the transportation network.
Thanks. Additional council questions, comments? A motion.
I move adoption of this item.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Meeker?
Yes.
Councilmember DeStefano?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Mormon?
Yes.
Mayor Netz?
Yes.
Mayor, this motion is passed 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 5, an ordinance relating to the annexation of Graham Swamp area. Mr. Reichman.
Yes, this is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, annexing 33 parcels of real property containing 3,294 acres, more or less, and generally located south of Palm Coast Parkway and west of Colbert Lane, more particularly and legally described on Exhibit A, which is attached to the ordinance, and fully incorporated by the reference, providing for the amendment of the city boundaries to incorporate the real properties in the city boundaries, providing for repeal of prior inconsistent ordinances, resolutions, severability, and effective date.
Thank you. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, this is also a second reading of really a 2-year process. We have an agreement with the St. John's River Water Management District, who owns the property, and Flagler County, who manages Grand Swamp, to bring it into the city, primarily because we have resources out there. We have trails, it's part of our drainage system, we have utilities that run through the swamp, and it's right in the middle of our town. So this proposal will bring it formally into Palm Coast. There is no development potential whatsoever. It doesn't change the management or the ownership of the swamp. This is more of just a housekeeping item. Jose is here to answer any questions, but at this point, we've not heard any additional comments, and once again, second reading, it's ready for final approval.
Thank you. Council questions?
Just a comment. I'm just glad to see it come back into the city. It was here all along during the ITT days, so how it slipped out is beyond me.
Because of the state's peculiar requirement of population density in order to incorporate. Additional council questions? Council questions? Seeing none, we'll open the meeting from the public. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 5? Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. Additional questions, comments, or a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Meeker?
Yes.
Councilmember DeStefano?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Mormon?
Yes.
Mayor Netz?
Yes.
Mayor, this motion is passed 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 6, an ordinance relating to the contraction, de-annexation of property more commonly known as naturescapes. Mr. Reichman.
An ordinance of the City Council, City of Palm Coast, Florida, for the voluntary contraction or de-annexation of the city boundary by de-annexing 2.25 acres, more or less, of real property generally located south of State Road 100 and west of Belterre Boulevard, more particularly and legally described on Exhibit A attached to the ordinance and fully incorporated by the reference, providing for the amendment of the city boundaries to contract the subject properties from the city boundaries, providing for repeal of prior inconsistent ordinances and resolutions, providing for severability and an effective date.
Thank you. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, this is very unusual, but this property owner a few years ago, 2 or 3, came to the city and asked to be annexed. And we approved that annexation at her request. Since that time, she continues to be frustrated with being fairly isolated because she's not her property, her business is not actually on State Road 100. It's Old Moody Boulevard that you have to, or Old Moody Road, to access her business, which is a county road that's dirt. There's no way of getting to this property via any city streets. City doesn't have any utilities there. Bunnell is, it's in their service area, and they are in the process of extending utilities to the area. As you can see from the map up on top, all the other businesses around Naturescape along State Road 100 are either in Bunnell or Flagler County, so she's basically an island. She's come to us and requested that she be de-annexed with the idea that Bunnell very likely will annex her, that property. And we, from a staff standpoint, agree with the fact that we really cannot provide services, and it does not make a whole lot of sense for her to be in the city. And so we're supporting her request to de-annex. This is a second reading. Once again, we have no additional comments or have not heard anything else, and believe that this ordinance is ready for second reading and final action.
Thank you. Council questions? Seeing none, let's open the meeting to the public. Any from the public who wish to be heard on agenda item number 6? Come up to the podium, give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes.
My name is John Erpelding. My question is about these annexes or de-annexes. What is the cost to the city of either annexing this property or de-annexing this property? If it now belongs to the city, are we now collecting tax dollars on the property? And if we de-annex it and give it to Bunnell, is the reason that they want to de-annex and go to Bunnell is because their city tax rate is lower?
It's higher.
Which means that we would then forfeit the tax money that's being taken from that property. If that's correct, then we should not de-annex it. We're giving away money. We can't afford to be giving away money.
Thank you. We got an answer to your question. Next speaker.
More expensive.
Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we close the public portion of the meeting, come back to City Council. But first, Mr. Landon, the issue of cost to initiate an annexation, to initiate a de-annexation, and the values, virtues of tax dollars.
Well, I'll start with the annexations. Obviously, when we annex, if it's private property, then yes, we get the tax base that goes along with that property. In the case of Grand Swamp, vast majority of that was public property that has no tax value to it, and therefore doesn't actually add to our tax base. There were a couple of very small environmentally sensitive areas that are privately owned that have conservation easements around Grand Swamp, but because there is no development potential, it's only a couple of dollars of tax value. As far as the de-annexation is concerned, yes, this property, when it is de-annexed, we would lose that tax base. The idea behind that is that we are not providing any service to this property. And if we were providing, let's say if it was along one of our streets and we were paving the street, we had utilities, it would make a lot of sense to keep it in the city. In this case, we are not providing those services. As far as are they doing it to go to Bunnell because the tax rate is lower? Absolutely not. Bunnell's tax rate is actually higher than Palm Coast. So the property owner, if she is annexed as planned into Bunnell, actually will pay higher taxes, but those tax dollars would go to the entity that's really providing the services versus an entity that's not providing the services. So from a fairness standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. This isn't about who can grab the most tax dollars. It should be about who's actually providing the services, and those people, and the entity that's providing the services should be getting the tax dollars.
Additional council questions, comments, or a motion?
I move adoption of this item.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Meeker.
Yes.
Councilmember DeStefano.
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis.
Yes.
Councilmember Mormon.
Yes.
Mayor Netz.
Yes.
Mayor, this motion is passed 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 7, a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate a contract with Waste Pro. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, some time ago we talked about how what a difficult process it is to either go out for proposals or extend a waste management garbage pickup, if you will, contract. But we're in that process right now. We currently have as background a contract with Waste Pro. It actually calls for 2 5-year terms. We are towards the end of the first 5 years. At the end of the first 5 years, which is December 31st. The contract calls for either party may discontinue or terminate the contract without any penalty, or if both parties agree, it could be extended for an additional 5 years. And if the contract is extended for an additional 5 years, then it can either be extended based on current terms, or if there are new issues that need to be addressed, it could be renegotiated with new terms. I am going to surprise Diane here, so Diane, don't fall off your chair, but I do my best thinking in the shower, and this one has been a real struggle, because the fact of it is a couple of philosophical issues. One of them is that in government, outcomes are not always the determining factor as to what action a government body will take. Process is, actually I always say, is about 98% of what is important to the public, and that is you have to have a fair process. And even if your outcomes are good, if your process is not, and it's not perceived as being fair, then your outcomes are usually criticized. In this case, our goal was to have basically 3 outcomes. One of them was to try to maintain quality service with lack of the temporary disruption that goes along with change. And I don't care what any of the waste haulers say, when you change trash service, it is very disruptive in the community. The second goal of our outcome was to try to save 60 jobs, where we currently have 60 local jobs. And that was always been a priority of this city council when you look at contracts of trying to go local. So that was one of our goals and the outcomes. And then lastly, the third main outcome we were looking for was to guarantee a reduction in the monthly bill that every resident pays in Palm Coast, and actually have that monthly charge that we put on the utility bill go down, and actually guarantee that those 3 outcomes could occur. But the only way you can guarantee those 3 outcomes to occur is to extend the current contract. The problem is that most people perceive the fair thing to do is to have a competitive bid process. And I know that City Council has gotten a lot of feedback from the community about open bid process is the right thing to do. So then I go to my next philosophical concept that my wife taught me many years ago. And that is that I usually have on key issues at home 2 options. I can fight about it and do it her way, or I can just do it her way. But it's my choice. I think this is one...
Operates much the same at my house.
Feels good, though. At least you have choices. In this case, I know that it's virtually impossible for City Council to say, we're not going to open this up for a competitive process. And so instead of Diane putting forth her presentation, I think that in this case, instead of fighting about it, we'll just do it whatever way you would like to do. And I think that very likely needs to be going out to bid. From a business standpoint, it makes more sense to guarantee your outcomes, but from a public process standpoint, your credibility, is hurt if people don't believe you're being fair. So that is really what's being weighed right here. If you adopt the resolution in front of you, we will bring back a proposal from Waste Pro that meets those 3 goals, or else we won't recommend it. If you do not approve this resolution, then we will notify Waste Pro that we intend to not extend the contract for 5 years, and we will go out on the street and request proposals. I want to stress, it is requesting proposals and not bids. This is not just low bid. It's a difficult process. We've all learned it one time or the other. Most recently for us, it's our custodial contract, where you have people that come from out of town, they give you a low bid, and then 6 months later, they can't do the work for that cost. We also had it with our landscape maintenance with Fox Landscaping, and the pain that goes through that process, and the local employees that were going to lose their job if we went outside. But I think the public still has that expectation of opening it up. But if you disagree and would like to hear Diane's presentation, happy to do that. I can tell you, you have multiple waste haulers out there dying to give you their arguments, and I think that's great. But I think our recommendation, we will just try to give you the pros and cons of the two concepts.
Mr. Landon, I'm going to suggest that we withdraw this item from the agenda, and let me give you my thinking on it. I had a get-together last night in the C section of Palm Coast, and the issue of solid waste came up, and to an individual, everyone there had very good things to say about Waste Pro. They were pleased with the service. They were pleased with the consistency. One gentleman even extolled the politeness and courtesy of the people, how they went above and beyond the expectations. So they were very pleased with Waste Pro. I have a feeling that, I'm just trying to read the room, so to speak, read the dais, that council would prefer to go out on bid. If you negotiate with Waste Pro, in essence, you're asking them to show all their cards.
Yeah.
Tell us what you can do for us, tell us what you're going to improve, and give us your best price. That is public record, and then if you do go out on bid, you put them at a competitive disadvantage. I think our current hauler has a competitive advantage right now. They're in the city, they know the route, they've got their local investment. It seems to me that they have a business advantage. The way we'll find out is to put this out to bid. So I don't see any point in discussing a resolution item that I don't think has council support. So my suggestion is that we remove this one from the agenda and proceed with the RFP. But as for council input.
I would support that. In fact, Mr. Landon, you jumped ahead of me because that was going to be my motion, that we table this and go out for an open bid RFP. And I think that way we will know that we have the best and the fair price, and hopefully we can reduce the monthly bill for the citizens.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Meeker.
You know, I'd like to say, we of course discussed this at the workshop, and I've been reading the emails as well, and I agree with the idea that the process needs to be open and transparent, but I just wanted to compliment your comments and the city managers for being probably one of the most open and frank discussions that I've heard in governmental politics since sitting up here.
Yeah.
So often government is accused of being on the take, or money sliding under the table, or if you don't agree with us, we're going to throw you bums out, or we're going to sue you guys, even though you're operating under your existing contract. There's nothing that brings up the hairs on the back of my neck more than having, baseless accusations like that and then responding to everybody's individual emails. I would also like to commend Waste Pro on the job they have been doing. I have absolutely no complaints with the work they've been doing and the way they've been doing, and none of them have run me off the road going around corners when I'm trying to leave it's that they're a great company. But I agree with everybody else, and this is what was said at the workshop, is in order to make sure that perception of fairness and transparency is out there, I think we have to do it this way, because the money amount that we're talking about is so big.
Mr. Lewis.
I would like to echo much of what has been said, but I'd like to say this also. It's unfortunate that we're doing this today as opposed to not doing it at the workshop, because I think when you look at the population of Palm Coast, a lot of people come from the Northeast, and they have a term that they use up there when you see something like this, and I think you all know what it is. It's called a sweetheart contract, because that's what I've been bombarded with. You know, what is the city doing? You know, they aren't going out to do an RFP. Everyone who have talked to me have been satisfied with the actions of Waste Pro. There hasn't been any comments. I mean, the comments as opposed to any negative happenings of Waste Pro. But the thing is, it's the method or the process that we're about to enter into that I think got people upset. I think anytime something looks what it is and is what it is, then you have to be concerned that people are going to see it as what it is. And they saw this as something that was not fair. Who knows? You know, after looking at all of the RFPs, you might come to the same position. But you must have that fairness, because it's a long-term contract, and there's a lot of money involved, and you have to let the residents see the other side of the coin. And I think, Mr. Mayor, that's where I am.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with what everybody said. After thinking about it, we really need to open it up. But I would like to ask Mr. Reichman or Mr. Landon, can we put in the RFP the specifics, the things that we want, rather than just pick up the trash 2 times a week, recycling, this kind of thing? Can we write specifics into the RFP to dictate what it is that
Let me
we would like?
piggyback on that before we ask the attorney. At the workshop, if you recall, we came up with a list of need-to-haves and nice-to-haves.
Yeah.
Obviously, we want good quality service. We want pickup when it's scheduled. We want clean, neat trucks. We want courteous drivers. We want an option of once a week, twice a week, give us your prices. We want recycling. We want the yard waste pickup. That needs to be part of what we're asking for. But then we had some additional things that we said we specifically want. We specifically want single-stream recycling. We specifically want enhanced recycling. I still can't understand the distinction between corrugated cardboard and a cereal box. To me, cardboard is cardboard, and they both ought to be recycled. We were very enamored with the idea of the incentive program for recycling.
Yes.
It not only increases the likelihood of people recycling, but it provides a no-cost advertising, if you will, for our local businesses. So those are things that I think, excuse me, as Mr. Mormon is suggesting, needs to go in, that do not give us a proposal unless you can meet these items. There are other items that were nice to have. We talked about compressed gas, natural gas, fueling, and so on and so forth. Nice to have, not essential. That would be a wonderful option if it were available, but it's not something that's critical to the RFP. So I guess with that kind of addendum to Mr. Mormon's comments, can we do that?
Also, can we do, in addition to what the mayor just said, local hire preference? When we put that in the RFP,
we already have.
I know we have it, but I'm saying, can we put that in the RFP to make sure they understand that we want local hires to get preference?
And to play attorney, and you can...
Well, he's looking something up, yeah.
I can assure you the answer to that is yes, you can. You know, that this, but I want to stress that this will not be a typical bid, just give us your price. This will actually be an evaluation. And I guarantee you, because I've done this before, that the waste haulers will not make this easy. They won't give you apples. They will give you strawberries and watermelons and apples, and it will be a very hard comparison. That's the nature of this business. We will try very hard to write the RFP so that you can compare apples to apples as much as possible. And we will have the items that you have to have and the items that, okay, if you did this, would the cost be the same, or would it be more, et cetera, and kind of those alternatives. Very similar to what the mayor just said. So yes, we will put it, but we do this with a lot of the other contracts that we go out and request proposals for, and local preference will be one of them. And you know, having a current local presence will be a factor, and we usually do this with points, if you recall, is that there are different points, and price will be one of the factors, but you know, this is one of those that why, yes, going out to competitive process is what government does, it's what people expect of us, but it's also what gives us a bad name many times because of taking low bid. Hurts the service, and then for 5 years you have people upset because you took low bid. So there's kind of that give and take in this. So we're going to try very hard to tighten those specifications down so that whoever receives the contract, we can hold their feet to the fire as much as possible to maintain the kind of service that Waste Pro has been giving us, if it's someone different than Waste Pro. If Waste Pro earns the bid, earns the contract, then you won't have those changes to deal with. I also want to add that Waste Pro has been very good about guaranteeing us that come January 1, if it hasn't been decided exactly who it is, or if it is somebody different, but they're not ready to go yet, they're not going to just take their trucks and leave town. They will continue to pick up trash as long as is needed under the current contract.
In my enumeration of the need to haves, I recall now at City Council there was discussion about the vehicle tracking capabilities and the complaint reception capabilities.
Single point source going to somebody other than city staff to resolve complaints.
But the fact that there can be a method of verifying was the truck on the street when it was supposed to be, and a method of receiving, recording, and reacting to consumer complaints.
I can tell you an automated system for consumer complaints is mandatory for us. We don't have the staff any longer. I mean, this is one of those areas where we have cut down substantially because of automation, and to take all those calls and having to call somebody at the other end without having an automated system it would not be very practical. So those are the things that have to be in a proposal, in our opinion, and if it's not in there, we'll reject it for not being responsive, as we do with all the processes.
And I have one more piece of input. I hope this isn't going to extraordinarily clutter the issue, but I received a call last night from a former member of our Utility Advisory Committee. He was very supportive of the existing hauler, but he said something you ought to ask about, make inquiry about, is the option, the possibility of directing the solid waste stream to one of the waste-to-energy facilities within our state. According to his recollection, Hillsborough County has a waste-to-energy facility or contracts with a waste-to-energy facility. Rather than directing your waste stream into a landfill here or in Georgia, you direct your waste stream into a plant that generates energy. Something, I don't know if it complicates the issue, but it's something I'd at least like to hear about based on the input from
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, adding on to that, though, there are solid waste stacks which generate LP gas that also go to an alternative fuel energy type operation as well. So just because it goes to a landfill operation someplace else doesn't necessarily mean that at some point in the future it's not generating, sorry, I think I said LP, but methane gas that's being used to supplement alternative fuel sources.
We can add that a lot of these options add costs because of transportation. Transportation is a major cost, so there's that balance between, you know, what the consumer, our residents have to pay, and the type of service that you provide.
And I raised that very issue with the gentleman last night. I said, are you willing to pay more? He said, no.
No.
He said, but if it's same cost or less, it's a more desirable. So,
All those in favor say aye.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. DeStefano.
I think Mr. Roy distributed, I think there's some back on the table, would like to do business in Palm Coast. And I think if you go in there, some bidding suggestions. And I think everyone that's going to put in a bid to look at that and read it, because it pretty much summarizes what Mr. Landon was saying, to comply with the bidding process.
I suspect that with a $7 million contract, these companies all have
Well,
You know, funny.
experience.
If that is, since that is our policy, you would expect that the bids to come in to be in compliance with that
Yeah.
policy and not contrary to it.
which is
One can
not.
only hope.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Eichmann, some direction, please. My recommendation is to remove the item from the agenda. Is that appropriate, or should we address the item and then vote it up or down? What's your suggestion?
Procedurally, you have several options. One, you can take action on the item as follows. You can hear from the audience. You can approve the resolution. You can reject it. You could table it or continue it. Probably continuance is the better way to do it. That really wouldn't make much sense based upon what I've heard today. Those would be your procedural options. Or you could just move to withdraw it. Just move to withdraw it.
That would be my preference.
I move to withdraw.
Motion to
Second.
withdraw, a second.
Yep.
Even though it's a resolution, let's have a roll call vote on this one, please.
Vice Mayor Meeker?
Yes.
Councilmember DeStefano?
Yes.
Councilmember Mormon?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Mayor Netz?
Yes.
Mayor, this motion is passed 5-0.
Thank you very much. Now, obviously, the city manager takes direction that now we proceed with the alternative.
Right.
Okay, I don't think that requires any. Agenda item number 8, resolution approving a contract for construction of Palm Harbor Pathway multi-use path. Mr. Landon.
I'm looking for the person that's going to do, Diane, you doing this presentation since you didn't get to do your last presentation?
You could.
Yeah.
Not thanks. No thanks.
Mayor, City
Ball's
Council.
in your court.
Yeah. This is the last of our grants that we've received. They're actually federal grants that we received through the Florida Department of Transportation for bike paths. It is the improvements to Palm Harbor with benches and some landscaping for the existing path, and then to extend the Palm Harbor Parkway path all the way up to the last street, which I thought we were going to have someone here to give a presentation. So Nestor and I obviously did not coordinate this very well. So let me, I think you all know where it's located. It's along Palm Harbor. It's primarily funded by a grant, the grant being, let me get to it real quick. The grant being in the amount of $1,380,000. The actual cost of the project, it will be a total of $1,442,000, with the balance of being from city capital improvement funds. This is the same item that you heard at your workshop, and I believe it's ready for city council action, ready for approval.
I have the color. Do you want to just put this up on the...
Sure. Brian, could you help with that?
I'll go on the overhead. So this is an extension of the existing path.
The clouded area is where the existing path is, all the way from the trailhead that is under the toll bridge, and it's an existing sidewalk, really, that runs along Palm Harbor. We originally were trying to widen and improve and have pedestrian bridges in this area, but this is where the cost came in well over budget, and therefore we had to make cuts to the scope of the work. Then outside of the clouded area, if you will, is the extension of the project, so that you have a trail all the way up to that northern street in the F section. So,
For clarification, it probably would have been better if that second label that says extent of new multi-use path, if the arrow pointed to the end of the proposal rather than to the middle.
right, it's that whole dark area that goes up to, is it Fenmore? Mill, which is the last street that connects. So the whole neighborhood of the F section there can get to the path via local streets along with the C section. So it's actually one of the, probably the question I receive the most is how come we don't have one in our neighborhood when everybody else is getting one? And you've all seen that many times.
My taxes.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I want to stress, it is one of those that it's, in fact, your next item on the consent is part of the local agreement with FDOT, Florida Department of Transportation, for the grant dollars. As all paths that you see under construction or have been construction recently are either funded by grant dollars or developers, or majority of those costs at least.
Thank you. Council questions? Seeing none, let's open the meeting from the public. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 8? Please excuse my voice. Please come on up, give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes.
Once again, my name is John Erpelding. I don't really have a question about what's going on here other than the fact that, as Mr. Landon said, his wife taught him a few things. Well, my wife taught me something also. She had a little saying, full price or nothing. If it's on sale, we don't want it. Well, obviously, she's the ex-wife, because if it's not on sale, I don't want it. I don't want to spend what I don't have. We can't spend what we don't have. I don't know where that proposal is gone, but you're talking about $1.4 million, you said? That's something that needs to be shelved for a future date, to when we can be cutesy about some of our past. It's ridiculous to spend that kind of money right now.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. But first, Mr. Landon, clarification on the funding for this project.
Yeah, well, first of all, it is grant dollars of $1,380,000. There is some matching, and that matching is $1,422,000. The difference will come out of our capital funds that is current. We do have the cash, so this isn't, we do have the dollars for this. If we turn these dollars away, they will just be spent in some other community. And on top of that, as far as paths and trails, it's probably the item that we get the top of request of anytime we do a survey, anytime somebody talks about quality of life and what they would like to see, these pedestrian bicycle trails are on top of the list. It's also a safety factor. Right now, people are having to ride their bicycle and walk on the edge of the street, and people are going 50, 55 miles an hour usually, and it's...
Not supposed to be.
Yeah, but they are. No, I'm sure. They're all going 45.
Now, that was not me, but I do see, I'm generally gone early in the morning, heading up that way. I head out of town that way and take the back way out. And I'm often there with, there's people wearing reflective colors, everything else like that, right on the edge of the road because the grass, is wet. They're worried about snakes, whatever. So it's a competition for being able to drive versus being able to walk. And the safety factor for students as well as pedestrians in this area, that's a needed extension.
But, and I would also, though, agree with the gentleman that you have to stay within your means. That is why this one has taken so long, is because the original bids came in well beyond our means, and we cut the scope down. The original bid came in at about $2.5 million. So we made sure that that was one of the mandates to our project manager, is get the scope of the work down so we are within our budget.
Additional council questions, comments, or a motion?
Motion to approve the item?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. This brings us to the consent agenda, which consists of 2 items. Would anybody like to remove either of the items from the consent agenda?
No.
If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. This brings us to the public participation portion of the meeting. Anyone wish to be heard on any item not on the agenda, please approach the podium, give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Bill McGuire. I live in Palm Coast. I've got 2 comments I'd like to make. First, it has to do with the BAC. I thought the PowerPoint presentation and the graphics were, as usual, first class, top of the line. When the BAC was first proposed, council said that there would be metrics put in place, and okay, it's only been there 90 days, so you wouldn't expect that they've set the world on fire. But a lot of the presentation had to do with philosophical points. My concern is I don't want to see the BAC, which I strongly advocate, devolve into something like Enterprise Flagler, where there's a lot of philosophical platitudes and look what they're doing over here going on, and there's not any results. I want to see the numbers. I want to see how many people have you talked to, what's been the result, how many new jobs have been created, the jobs saved. Okay, that's a gimme, I guess you might say. So, but I strongly advocate the BAC. I think the principle is a good one, and I would very much like to see it be successful. But I think it's going to be successful if we keep the pressure on them, show us the numbers. And again, after 90 days, you wouldn't expect that they've had a huge success. My second point has to do with the waste hauling. I live in Palm Coast. I'm tickled to death with Waste Pro. I think my garbage is being handled in an absolutely exemplary manner. But having spent years and years in management in the private sector, one of the jobs that was put on my shoulders was, as a senior manager, you're responsible for negotiating. If you're a skilled negotiator, then you're going to do what's right for this company. Now, we've got what I would consider to be a skilled negotiating team. We have a city manager who's experienced in it. We have an attorney, and they all have their staffs accordingly. I think that this should not be what's best for Waste Pro. I think it should be what's best for the citizens of Palm Coast, and I would expect that the city would come in with a skillful negotiation that would bring these numbers home to the city of Palm Coast and make all the citizens happy, as well as hopefully a waste hauler. And I don't really care who they get. If it disrupts my service, then I'll live with that if it's a better deal for the city. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. At the end of the meeting, sir, I'd be happy to share this current statistics on the Business Assistance Center.
I think it's on the table over there.
Is it on the table over there?
I think they put all the handouts
Okay.
on the table.
Then there's an impact sheet over there you can pick up. It'll give you the very numbers you've asked for.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
My name is Earl Scott, 9 London. There's something going on at London Drive in terms of rezoning or proper zoning of Liddell Drive in that area. So I just want to bring that up to your attention. As I thought about this, I kind of discovered that, have we gotten away from the plan? I appreciate Mr. Meeker talking about ITT, because that's one of the reasons that we came to this community, because it was a planned community. There's a lot of good in that, and you know what you're getting into. But in terms of this particular property, the zoning has changed. And so what was wrong with the plan in the beginning? There is something wrong with the plan that a person, it's not me, by the way, I'm half a mile away, But there's something wrong with the person who bought property on a golf course and so paid twice as much, and then has the possibility of 25 feet behind their backyard having a two-story apartment complex. And I could go on and on about that, but I really want to know what I can do as a citizen to approach the Planning and Zoning Commission, and what the relationship is. What's the proper procedure for me to go? I do want to say I want to thank the commissioners, and there were 3 of you all who responded to my wife's email, and I want to thank each one of you all. Found out something about the mayor. I think my wife's email is about that long, and the mayor's email reply back was about that long. So I think he was concerned about that and gave her a lengthy answer. So I feel the plan that ITT developed was a good thing, and I believe a lot of expectations. Remember, the people made their individual decisions where to buy and build their house based on that plan. And when you go start changing that plan, then that has an effect on everybody. So I would like an answer to that question, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll get an answer for you. Next speaker.
A couple of more items. One main thing I came here, I wanted to talk about, John Erpelding. I'm in Palm Coast. We're proposing a millage increase from 3.5 to 4.0, or at least this is what is written. What you've done is you've come down from a 4.3 or something like that back to 4.0, and you want to call it a tax break. I think it's important that the people understand that is not a tax break. If you go from 3.5 to 4.0, what you are effectively doing is you are raising the property taxes 14%. That's a huge increase. At somewhere along the line, you're going to have to cut back some spending. You're going to have to find some other kind of money, because you just can't tax the people to death. People are leaving this town. It's a cute little town. It's a nice little town. You got to cut it back. 3.5 is the max. The second thing I want to address is, again, this Waste Pro. This Waste Pro, what we have right now, I've lived in 4 different states. I have never, in all the time, different homes that I've had, I've never had trash pickup 4 days a week. I do. Now I have it 4 days a week. I don't need it 4 days a week. Somewhere along the line in the proposals, I understand that, there's a lot of people in this day and age, what they want now is they want cardboard and plastics and everything else. I don't really know about that. I don't really care about that. I get trash pickup twice a week, and then I get yard waste once a week. That can be consolidated into one pickup. And if you can consolidate 3 days of pickup into 1 day pickup, you're going to consolidate and lower the cost. And that should be in the plan. There's no reason why we need a garbage truck going down the street 4 days a week. We just don't need it. We can save money by going once and still be efficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Jack Kyle, Palm Coast. I was at the county commission meeting last night, and the election commissioner, whoever she is, I forgot her name, she brought up the fact that she's going to get $55,000 from the county. And then there was a little blip that I heard after that, was she gets that money back from the state. So it's a reimbursement. She gets it from the county, and then she gets it back from the state. Now, we're giving her, I don't know, several $1,000s. Do we get that back the same as the county does? Thank you.
We'll get you an answer, Jack, although I know what the answer is. Next speaker. Next speaker.
Charlie Erickson, Palm Coast. Just when you thought the garbage issue was done, I have one question. Right now, I read on a local website that the city applies a excise tax to the waste or the waste contract to the tune of about $500,000 a year or more, and that the contractors must put back into their bid process. Could someone please explain to us what that franchise tax is and how it affects the bill we receive on a monthly basis? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get an answer to your question. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. But first, the question of metrics on the Business Assistance Center. I directed the speaker to a sheet that gives some of the specifics he talked about, how many people contacted, how many businesses worked with, capital dollars raised, so on and so forth. In the presentation that Mr. Roy made, he has proposed two metrics, which is return on investment. And yes, I think council expects to see those on a regular basis. Then there was the question about a proposed development in the vicinity of the golf course, and the real question was how to proceed. I'm going to caution council in your comments, remember that this is a quasi-judicial issue. It will very likely come back to City Council. Be very cautious in any comments that you offer. Mr. Landon, if a citizen is concerned about a potential development, I don't believe there's a rezoning involved here, but I'm not clear. Could you advise the citizens how they best proceed and how this issue will probably proceed?
Yes, this is actually not a rezoning. It is a site plan approval, so the process is a little different than a rezoning. It's already zoned for multifamily, and I think that's what the gentleman's concern is that plan. But it is zoned multifamily. There will be a public meeting where public comment can be made at the planning board. The site plan is actually will be approved or denied by the planning board. If someone appeals that decision of the planning board, it will come to City Council.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Do we have the date for the planning board meeting yet?
I do not. I believe it's been set, but I don't have it. I don't have it with me.
It was set for the 17th, but canceled.
Give us a call at City Hall. We'll tell you when, where.
We'll Nestor is in the back. Nestor will get with. If he'll talk with you after the meeting, give you when the meetings are, who to contact, and we'll. I think the public process.
Second issue. Planning board is a public meeting. The public is always invited to speak. Anyone from the public can speak on the item.
Yes.
Mr. Landon pointed out that there are two options that the planning board has. It can approve the site plan revision or it can deny it. In either case, any decision by the planning board may be, and here's what the attorney needs to help me, may be appealed to the City Council. In order to appeal, the party has to meet certain criteria. Mr. Reichman, in order to appeal a decision of the planning board, who can make such an appeal?
Staff can make such an appeal, the applicant can make such appeal, and an affected party, and that is defined in your land development code. And I do not have that specific citation, but that would be something that would be determined as a matter of law based upon the code in your land development code.
We can get that answer to you specifically.
So the issue is anyone can speak at the planning board meeting, but if somebody on either side doesn't like the decision of the planning board, certain parties may appeal to the mayor and council. And obviously, were it to come to the mayor and council, also it's open to the public. Public can speak on any issue. So.
And it is quasi-judicial, as the mayor indicated, which means it would not be appropriate. In fact, it's against the law for City Council to discuss it at this time, because there will be that public hearing here in front of them that is where they have to discuss the merits, where both sides are in the room. They can't discuss it with just one side in the room at this point.
No backroom deals.
Yep.
The next speaker, I believe, made an erroneous statement indicating that, in his opinion, a change in the millage rate from 3.5 to 4.0 or something in that vicinity is a tax increase. By state law, it is not. The fact of the matter is that the city will raise less money from taxes in the coming year than it did in the current year. Any way you shake it out, if you're taking in less money, it's a decrease in taxes. Now, because of the Save Our Homes amendment, some people may see a slight increase because they're still picking up on accumulated depreciation, but overall, the residents of Palm Coast will pay less taxes in the coming year than in the current year. The issue of trash 4 times a week, I'll just offer a comment. I don't really want to get into this discussion. You got to have your garbage picked up. You want to have your recycling picked up, and you want to have your lawn waste picked up, your shrubs and bushes and stuff like that. Whether they pick them up 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, they've got to get picked up. One of the single biggest costs in solid waste collection is what are called tipping fees. You can't just fill up your truck and wave a wand and have it go away. It has to go to a landfill, to a waste-to-energy converter. It has to go somewhere, and there's costs involved in that. And those costs are allocated on a per-ton basis. So whether I pick up 100 tons of garbage twice a week and take 50 tons at a time to the landfill, or if I take 100 tons at one time, I'm still going to get the same tipping fee because I'm picking up the same amount of volume. So while once a week pickup is an option, and an option we're going to ask for, intuitively you'd say, well, if you're only picking up once a week, it ought to be half as much cost. That's not the case and probably will not be the case.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Meeker.
Can I make one other comment on that? The other critical thing in solid waste disposal is source separation, or the waste streams that are being generated. And if you go to the concept of 1 day a week, all waste streams go into the same truck, it negates the benefits of having the source separation of yard clippings, yard debris, not yard clippings, but yard debris, composted type materials being able to go to a facility that is capable of handling composting and all that. It negates, you don't want to blend your streams of white goods where you've got refrigerators with spent refrigerant still inside of it, or dryers with palladium and other chemicals in it going into the waste stream. You need to separate these things out and basically keep trash going to the trash place and compostable materials going to another place, and those areas, things like the white goods and all that, going to another operation.
Frank, don't forget your recyclables.
And the recycling materials as well, the glass, the plastics, that.
Which we also get a return back to the city on recycled. They sell it, and that money comes back to the city of Palm Coast.
So what we don't want is to be tossing all of those waste streams into one truck and then sending it out to Georgia. That's just not the right thing to do.
Okay. Mr. Landon, a question was asked about rebates on election costs. I think I know the answer.
I can assure you that the supervisor election has no intention of rebating any of our costs. She will bill us based on direct costs for the municipal election that will happen in September and November. I will also remind the public that that's why City Council put on the ballot in September the change in election dates, so that municipal elections will be on the same years as your county, state, and federal elections. That will greatly reduce the cost because you only have to do all the ballots and everything once, and then we all share in that cost. So, but I can assure you that I don't know what the relationship is between the county and the state, but she will charge us her cost for this election, and we won't be getting any of it back. And that cost, I believe, is, help me out, Virginia, $60,000 per election is the estimate.
Yeah, I thought it was in the $50,000 range or something.
So with 2 elections, we're talking probably somewhere between $100,000 and $120,000.
The last speaker asked about the franchise fee on solid waste contracts. Could you just give us a quick overview?
Yeah, it's a pretty standard across the board. It's intended to go towards maintaining the streets. The idea is that heavy trucks on the streets are going to cause some damage. Plus, for our administrative costs, we have people that also deal with the trash pickup, the complaints, dealing with the contract. Those dollars do go on the general fund that do support street maintenance and the administrative costs for administering the contract and the service.
Thank you. Okay. I think that handles all the comments from the public. Discussion by City Council of matters not on the agenda. Mr. Meeker.
Nothing from me, Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. DeStefano.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council.
Excuse me.
Since January, there's been a great deal of discussion on Enterprise Flagler, economic development, and some quotes from me. I'd just like to clarify that we desperately need jobs in this city and in this county. However, if we're going to do it, we got to do it right. And I believe that there should be a very, very clear strategic plan. It should have its goals and objectives, and it should have an annual assessment as to how they're doing. And there should be provided a quarterly report to everyone so we know what's being done. And I personally believe that businesses need to strongly participate because they're going to be benefiting. There's been talk about the county doing it. There's been talk about the private industry doing it. I would like to caution everybody, if a government entity would do economic development, I believe you would have a severe difficulty in keeping that confidential because everything is a public record. I don't have the answer to economic development, but I do caution how we proceed. I believe what we're doing in the city of Palm Coast is the best thing we can do for the funds we're expending. But I wish that everybody that's listening today would provide their opinion, come up with a positive way of how we can do it to bring businesses. But it's got to be defined. We've got to know why, what, how you're going to do it, where you're going to get the funding. I have my own opinion about funding. I believe the county gets ad valorem taxes, and so the county should be footing the bill. But we need to be careful who is on this economic development program. Who is going to be on that? Because, again, and I think the attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but if any government does it, there's not going to be any confidentiality. And if there's no confidentiality, businesses are not going to work with us. Because how many times over the last 7.5 years I sat on council and I've heard about Operation X and Operation Y. They don't want anybody to know that they're negotiating with several states or several cities. And so that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis.
None.
Mr. Mormon.
Yes, sir. I just want to compliment Fox Landscaping and our Public Works people. You know, I travel Belterre frequently, live in the area. And that, you know, it seems like every day it looks better. Those guys are diligent. They maintain the landscape, they trimming, they pulling weeds. I mean, they take care of that better than I take care of my yard. And I just want to compliment them. They're doing a great job out there, and I'm sure Belterre South, which looks good, is starting to look good as they do the landscaping there, will be just as nice. But I just want to compliment Fox and the Public Works guys. They're doing a good job there.
Thank you. I have three little items that arose from our workshop. The question was raised about overnight parking of trucks in the Walmart lot, and the question that I had was, can you tell us what our land development code has to say about that? Have you had an opportunity to research that yet?
Yes.
Are you prepared to tell us, or?
Yes.
No, I just researched it.
Keep it a secret.
Actually, I was trying to watch my attorney, see if he was going to jump in this time, but he didn't. Okay. Our land development code does not address the concept of trucks parking in commercial parking lots. It's something that can be addressed. There's three different issues. One of them is the RVs and the truck drivers that are coming in to get something to eat. Maybe they're going in to do a little shopping for things they need on the road. I don't think anybody objects to that. They come in, they eat, do their shopping, and they leave. On the other hand, you have something else that's happening, and I think this is Mr. Lewis's main concern, is that you have the truck drivers that are local that are parking Friday night in a commercial parking lot, leaving it there all weekend, and Monday morning going back, and so they're really storing their vehicle there over the weekend. And that is usually considered inappropriate, to say the least, because your commercial parking lots, retail parking lots, should not be truck storage. And then the middle ground is the ones that come in, probably get something to eat, maybe do a little shopping, and then take their nap, whether that's during the day or night. And that middle ground, you'll get different opinions as to, is that okay or not okay. What we at staff, I've instructed my staff to do right now, is address those weekend storage trucks only. The others are very difficult to determine, okay, so you're here for an hour or 3 hours or 4 hours, and then you hit the road again. I'm not hearing that objection, but if you're there all weekend, and we can determine that we will work with the businesses first and see if the businesses won't police their own parking lots. If not, then we may have to come back to City Council and ask to see if you wanted to adopt an ordinance that we can enforce.
Thank you. Second,
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to add, first of all, my co-counsel did a very good job of answering that question. Secondly, you're really looking at two different parts of your code. We have in our regular code of ordinances, we have parking regulations, and when we met last week to address this issue, we all agreed that there was nothing in there that specifically addresses this issue. So then you have to turn to your land development code. Remember now, we're talking about private property. And at this particular discussion, and your code of ordinances primarily deals with what you can do on public property, rights of way and swales and things like that. But your land development code, of course, would have permitted uses and what you can and cannot do on your own private property. And so there's nothing in there specifically, as far as we can tell, on this particular parcel that would address it. And then you've got enforcement issues as well, and that's where we agreed that we needed to evaluate the best way to address what is occurring on private property.
and it seems to me, given it's a private property issue to some extent, an outreach to the management of Walmart, just saying this is an issue for our city, can you help us?
Absolutely. We talked about that.
The cleanest way to approach it.
And I want to stress, it's not just Walmart. We're
I understand.
finding them in other
That's the
places,
one that
too.
was mentioned in the workshop, but it's all private property. Second item, eventually, in September, this council is going to have to approve a budget. At the moment, one of the budget reduction items is the closing of the swimming pool in the cold winter months. We've asked the manager to negotiate with the Board of Education to see if there's some way that cooperatively we can provide a swimming facility for our residents during those months. I don't know if you're prepared to comment yet, but before we approve the final budget, I'd like to hear what success we've had in that area. And lastly, a reminder to council, at the workshop, I raised the issue about selecting our legislative priorities. Every year, the Northeast Regional Planning Council, of which we are a member, publishes a list of priorities for legislation for our legislators, basically putting forth things that local counties, cities would like to see our legislature do, instead of picking on us. That maybe there's some ways they can help us. The Regional Planning Council has again requested that we provide them with input. What do we think should be the legislative priorities for our county for the upcoming year? I've asked council to provide me with any suggestions, and anybody from the public who says, yeah, I've got an idea what the Tallahassee legislature ought to do, if you communicate it with one of your council members, we can see about putting it on our list. And that's all I have. So, discussion by city attorney of matters not on the agenda.
Get me out of this.
Let me follow up just briefly, and we're jumping ahead a little bit. In your last workshop this coming month, staff and your city manager and I will be talking about some matter dealing with some moratoriums at pain clinics and internet cafes. But Mayor, you just mentioned something, and I just thought it makes sense for continuity. You mentioned legislative priorities, and one of the things that we'll be talking about is the inherent difficulty with regard to internet cafes, starting at the top, and that's at the state level. So to the extent that I don't know what the deadline is, Mayor, for the presentation of the city's concerns regarding legislative priorities, but at some point in time, I would respectfully suggest that one of those items may be regulation or changes in the state regulation of internet cafes. And we've talked about this before, but that is something that your staff is going to make a more complete presentation to you at the end of this month in a workshop format. Thank you. That's it.
Discussion by city manager of matters not on the agenda.
First of all, Mayor, I don't have a final answer for you on the swimming pool. We will continue conversations with the school district and hopefully have that in the next couple of weeks prior to the budget being adopted. Couple of things. At the last business meeting of City Council, we did not know exactly when our elections would be and who would be candidates. We do know that now, so I think it's important to make that announcement. We will have the election in September 13th, which is a Tuesday, and that will just be for the mayor. There's 3 candidates for the mayor, so we have to have what we call a primary here. It's kind of a bad term, but it's what we refer to as a primary. Then if one candidate gets over 50% of the vote, then that candidate is elected. If no one gets 50% of the vote, then there will be a runoff in November, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the September election has an early voting time period from August 29th through September 10th, with the exception of Labor Day, that Monday. The polls won't be open. Early voting is held at our public library at the corner of Belterre and Palm Coast Parkway. And the early voting polls will be open from 8:30 to 4:30. On the 13th will be voting day, and that will be, is it from 7 to 7? 7 to 7. And on that day, we have 6 polling places, and it doesn't matter where you live. As long as you're a registered voter, you can vote in any one of those 6 polling places. So I won't try to go through each one of those right now, but just ask people to educate themselves as to where they're located, and stress that they do not have to vote at their precinct, because there are no precinct polling places or general polling places citywide. Then in November, we will also have an election for Council Seat 1 and 3. Both of those seats, there are 2 candidates, and that's why there's not an election in September, because there's just 2 candidates. So the November 8th is when that election will be. That also will be from 7 to 7 that day. And it will be the same 6 general polling places. There will be early voting for the November election that starts October 24th, and it runs through November 5th. And once again, it'll be at the public library. and the hours will be 8:30 to 4:30. Virginia, make sure I'm getting all this right, because I don't want to get bad information out.
That's correct. The other issue that will be on the primary ballot is going to be the referendum.
Yes, thank you. The referendum, which is amendment to our city charter, as I mentioned before, that will change the election years to even years consistent with the county, state, and federal elections. So they'll be on the same ballot as those elections. The second issue that I wanted to brief City Council on, I think Richard would tell you it's probably been most of his life, but I believe it's been about 7 years that we have been trying to get a consumptive use permit. And last week, the Water Management District approved our consumptive use permit, which is better known as a CUP, and it is for a 20-year permit, which they were wanting to go just till 2015.
Congratulations to anybody and everybody who worked on that issue.
Yes.
That is a monumental achievement.
Yep. So, we continue to have strong water resources. The CUP is obviously a huge success, as the mayor's indicating. It has allocation that we do not know if our allocation, depending on growth, will last for the 20 years. But if we need a higher allocation because of growth, then we'll have to address it at the time. But at least at this point, we have a permit for 20 years. And that is excellent news. A lot of hard work went into that. And glad to, can't tell you how pleased I am finally have that one behind us. Mayor, that's all I have today.
What I'd like to do, and I'm going to try to do this as fairly as I possibly can, because there's not been a lot of information given to the public about this Palm Coast City Charter Amendment referendum. Our city charter, as it was written back in 1999, specifies that city elections are held in the odd-numbered years. In talking to some of the framers of the early charter, the reason they selected that was they thought that, A, keeping it away from county, state, and federal elections reduces the amount of partisan influence, because your county, state, and federal elections are partisan, and by charter definition, your city elections are nonpartisan. They felt that separating it temporarily from the others would reduce partisanship. It would also allow the voters to concentrate more on local issues rather than clouding what might be local issues with county, state, and federal issues. On the other hand, as Mr. Landon pointed out, moving the elections to an even-numbered year can save considerable dollars for the city. And arguing in favor of that, in addition to cost savings, the common traditional wisdom is that you get a greater voter turnout on those more popular election years, and therefore a greater percentage of Palm Coast residents will vote on Palm Coast issues. There are benefits to each, there are costs to each, but because the election timing is in the charter, and according to charter language, the only way the charter can be changed is through a charter amendment that is voted on in a public referendum. This is the opportunity for the public to speak on how our charter is constructed or construed. So make your decision as to which you think is the better approach, and then vote accordingly on September 13th. That's all I have. Mr. Meeker?
Motion to adjourn.
We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.